All right. Well, I have a lot to say, and as Was said, he's going to post the presentation. So if you miss something, or I go too fast, or maybe we can pick it up in Q&A, or we can, or it'll be on the screens. This is not a partisan. The Umstead Coalition and TORC are the not-for-profits, nonpartisan fighting proposed quarry on land next to Umstead State Park that is managed by the RDU Airport Authority, but owned by 4 local governments. So tonight I'm going to cover a lot of things. I whittled it down to 30 slides, but they're jam-packed. An overview for those who this may be somewhat new about what we're talking about, where this quarry is proposed, who owns the land, currently what the airport is proposing with respect to its non-aviation land use, issues with the current quarry that's in the near proximity, and the proposed quarry, and some of the myths and opportunities that we hopefully could still gain or could lose, and where are we now and what you can do to help. So just to remind everybody where we're at here, this is not our quarry, but whoops, I messed up already. I can't make it work now. There we go. Let's try that again. All right, so let me see if I can play the right one. So a quarry is full of sounds. We have the blasting. We also have air quality issues. And it's also a trucking facility. Well, maybe it's not. There we go. So that was a 75 cubic yard truck. The normal trucks you see on the road are only 12 cubic yards, but that's what they would be around the quarry site. Let me give you a highlight of where we are. And this is a regional trail map and how important this area is for our regional trails system. So what we have is, this is Umstead State Park. The airport is up here. And these highlighted areas are our trails, our connected trails. Over here on the left is the American Tobacco Trail, connected via trails from Morrisville and the Black Creek Greenway Trail, et cetera, from Cary up through Lake Crabtree County Park, through Old Reedy Creek Road into Umstead State Park. And then the Oddfellows track is a 105-acre tract right in this vicinity, right on the trail. Let's drill down to that closer area there. Again, Umstead State Park. The yellow is the airport, and this area right here is the proposed new quarry. And again, this is the Greenway connection that connects Lake Crabtree County Park through Old Reedy Creek Road into Umstead State Park. And this track here, managed by the airport, is 2 miles from the runway. And it has been determined and declared as surplus or not needed for any kind of aeronautic, what we would think of as aviation runway terminals, that kind of thing. Now, the same area of the land that's over down here on the this right yellow area is the Oddfellows track again. And it's bounded on the bottom side by Crabtree Creek. And this area right in here is coined 286 by some, or at least part of 286. And these yellow areas, plus some other area, are been identified by the parks since the park was established in 1934 as land acquisition for Umstead State Park, and identified as critical land acquisition for water quality. And in the last decade or so, also been identified for bike trails to join with William B. Umstead State Park. And also the community during this fight has coined this whole area, including Lake Crabtree County Park down here, as RDU Forest. And it's a connected greenway space with a lot of opportunity. Now, we get asked a lot who owns the airport or assumes it's some entity all by itself, but I want to relay, and the judge has agreed, that the ownership of the airport is the 4 local governments of the counties of Wake and Durham, the cities of Raleigh and Durham. And then the airport authority has, and that is by state law. The airport authority is composed of staff and then appointed members from each of the 4 owning local governments. And they have authority to manage the airport for airport purposes, runways, terminals, that kind of thing. But to just bring this home, the vested owners of the Oddfellows track, or the owners, are still listed on the deed as it was in 1976 of the cities and the counties. You can see highlighted here at the bottom of the screen as part of the deed. The Oddfellows, who own the track, is a fellowship organization, and they provided fellowship for their own members and also had a big youth program. And they purchased the property in 1958. Boy Scouts used the property by their proactive Boy Scout program. And then when they were forced to sell to the airport for a perpendicular runway never built in 1976, there was an agreement that the Boy Scouts could continue to use the property, and they did until the quarry came to light here recently. So now the airport, as you may know, went through a recent Vision 2040 master planning for the runways, the terminals, the parking areas, and what's called the master plan or land use plan for the non-aviation aspects. And on the aeronautic side, the runways, terminals, et cetera, we expect coming up next year an environmental impact statement process for those. And so we'll be actively involved in that as well. On the land use side, here's what they proposed, ignoring a massive public input. And as far as I can tell, there was no public input that promoted any of the following. Clear all of the forested areas in Lake Crabtree County Park between Lake Crabtree and I-40 that are currently 147 acres of bike ped trails and create an office park. Destroy the Oddfellows track with a quarry. And all of that, most of that land next to Umstead State Park and the 286 vicinity, et cetera, would be remote parking. And oops, sorry about that. That's their great vision in their 2040 plan. Obviously, we think that's a lost opportunity there, and not listening to the community and the public. Now, in part of this, recently, they've added something called a perimeter security fence. So just to orient you, on the bottom, this land right here is the Oddfellows track. And on the other side of Crabtree Creek, down to the bottom right, is an existing quarry, which we'll talk about in a little bit. There's some private residential tracks in here, and then back to the airport managed land. This little track right here is one subset of 286, that's 150 acres. Lake Crabtree County Park, 147 acres of it, that's the forested part, is right here. And of course, this is William B. Umstead State Park outlined in green. The red is the proposed perimeter fence. Note the islands. I mean, I don't understand what this is for. There's an existing security fence, which is highlighted in yellow, and it actually continues around the airport. I just didn't finish it. That already protects the parking lot, the terminals, the runways, et cetera. So it's not needed for security for the airport. So it's very controversial. The Umstead Coalition submitted grave water quality, well, the public got all upset because part of it was also to sever this through trail into Umstead State Park that goes like right here. And we can come back to Q&A about all those little details there. and there was a lot of squawk. They backed it up a little bit on January of this year. And yet in March, right when COVID was like shutting the airlines basically down, they submitted a permit for the noose buffers for all the stream crossings in this area. It's quite sensitive, a lot of streams. And also they added $4 million to their approved budget in March for this. Now, so one perhaps nicety of COVID is that they can't spend their $4 million. But DEQ denied their permit in mid-year. And I learned today that DEQ resubmitted their permit effective October 14. So we're back in that ball game of hopefully fighting this fence that doesn't seem to have any purpose for airport security. We can come back to Q&A. So what is the fence proposed? It's proposed to be, this is Old Reedy Creek Road. This is actually a greenway connection. These people are coming from Lake Crabtree County Park, running to Umstead State Park. The Oddfellows track is to your screen left. And this fence does not exist. This is a rendering that was done by our Charlie Morris. Thank you, Charlie. And it's an 8-foot high fence with 3 rows of barbed wire. And in addition to what you see here, there would be 30 feet of forested clearing and gravel patrol roads on each side. Now, speaking of Charlie, I think I might have had it in an earlier slide, but I want to make sure everybody saw it or knows it. He did a 1-hour documentary that you can link on our website at stoprduquarry.com and see it. So very good information about what's happening here. So hopefully you join me that this fence is not what you'd call character with our park. The North Carolina State Parks wrote a severe letter to the RDU Airport Authority, stating their severe concerns and threatening the National Register of Historic Place designation for the park, etc. And the local governments also sent their vibes for not wanting to have the fence. Now, one myth that I'd like to talk about today is, before we talk about the proposed quarry in the Oddfellows track, highlighted in red here, Crabtree Creek again, Lake Crabtree County Park, Umstead State Park. There is an existing quarry, which you can see the entrance to if you come in the Harrison Avenue entrance into the Reedy Creek entrance. This is the big parking lot on your lower right of the screen to William B. Umstead State Park. And there's, if that's your popular entrance, you will notice that there's a lot of trucks that come out, about 500 trucks a day. And the myth that the Wake Stone private company, this is privately owned. It was a big controversy when they went in, as you can imagine. We'll talk a little bit about that later. And they say that they've been a great neighbor to the park, and therefore they'll continue to be a great neighbor over here. Well, I would like to disagree. And I'll give you some examples. First of all, I mentioned the trucks. If anybody's come in here, walked, biked, drove, there's a lot of trucking conflicts at one of our major park entrances. It's noisy. Also, there's a long history of this current quarry discharging white discharge into Crabtree Creek, and Umstead State Park is right here. So they're discharging, and 2 feet down, they're in the park. Now across where you would be standing if you took this picture, you're in Umstead State Park, real close to the Company Mill Trail. And the rangers have told me, and other park visitors, that this, couple things, they see when it rains this kind of white plume until recently, and it would stay a plume in Crabtree Creek all the way more than a mile downstream to the Company Mill Dam site, and which is quite significant. That means there's a lot of sediment in that. And then the ranger said that even without storms of much water, it would always be running cloudy. Now, just recently, with a lot of squawking by us and awareness of the public, they have done something on site to help clean up this particular problem. But the discharge creek coming in here is still not a very healthy looking stream compared to the other streams in the park. Now, if you come to another section of the Wake Stone Quarry, this is at Harrison Avenue, and this is their irrigation runoff from their driveway, which is actually a public road. Star Lane is a public DOT road that they use as their entrance. And when they're trying to get rid of the dust, which they're only semi-successful in, they irrigate it and it flows right off site. This is very close to Star Lane. And this right here, where the water kind of disappears, is the boundary of Umstead State Park. You walk just a little bit down this way towards the park, I'm in the park taking this picture now, and I took both these pictures. And this direction is Crabtree Creek. Well, the park boundary is here. Oopsie, sorry about that. So all these dead trees and all that water did not exist in this form before the quarry came in 1981. It was none of this water and none of these dead trees and none of this ponding. That was complained about by various citizens over the decades. It's all in the mining records downtown. And in addition, the park complained, and the quarry said, oh, we fixed it. Well, they didn't fix it in 1980s, they didn't fix it in 1990s complaint, they didn't fix it in 2000s complaint. And they refused to give me a written response to my complaints on this. But the record is full of complaints on this. Now they call it they started calling it a violation, but now they're calling it a discrepancy or something like that. So the quarry says they haven't got any violations, but I think it is. It's a violation of their permits. Now they also had in the original quarry, which we can come back to in Q&A if you're interested, it was very controversial. It should have been denied, but they finally got a permit, but they also agreed to a 50-year sunset clause, which would end the current operation coming off of Harrison Avenue in May of 1931. Now in March of 2019, with no computer record, no notification of state parks that they made that commitment to, no public notice, nothing in the dusty records of hanging folders at DEQ in mining, they crossed out the sunset clause and said, and basically got rid of it. The clause said 50 years or quarryable rock, whichever is sooner. They crossed out sooner and put 50 years or quarryable rock, whichever is later. So we discovered it finally when we were looking for, if they were doing anything else with existing, the new proposed quarry in November. It took us a while to discover it, actually. We complained, and so we still think that that's wrong and it should be overturned. In addition, during that time frame, they also had the audacity to change what they had promised originally, and the same with the sunset clause over 9 permit renewals that they agreed to since 1981 to 2019 for having undisturbed forested buffers of various widths, depending on if they're next to Umstead State Park or Crabtree Creek. They changed the associated map of the permit to being, instead of undisturbed, to unexcavated. And that'll come up later on the new quarry too, so it's pretty important. So unexcavated in a mining world means anything except for dig the dirt. So deforestation, roads, fences, sediment controls, berms, you can rise above it, are all allowed. So essentially, there's no more commitment to what we would normally think of as undisturbed forested buffers. That was part of the agreement to protect Umstead State Park. Now over here to the right is Umstead State Park, and that is Crabtree Creek. See, they're kind of like, and then down in this area right here, in 1992, when they had one of the blasts, they actually just had a big landslide into Crabtree Creek and filled up 90% of Crabtree Creek right here. Now keep that in mind We're talking about another quarry on the other side. This is the Oddfellows track. This is Umstead State Park. And this right here is the Old Reedy Creek Road. So where are we in the current mining permit? So in, they have that Vision 2030 in October of 2017. They ignored the public comment and said we're going to have, in concept, an industrial site in the Oddfellows tract. The Conservation Fund offered $6.46 million with the concurrence with state parks to purchase it and give it to Umstead State Park. We still believe that's the better financial deal for the airport as well as a better deal for the community. The airport rejected both offers, the quarry and the Conservation Fund for Umstead State Park and for recreation and for bike trails. And then there was a 15-month silence in March of 2019 with a 48-hour notice. There was a 4-minute and 17-second meeting where the Wake Stone private company attorney read a little statement, and they signed a mineral lease. The Umstead Coalition and TORC filed an appeal. It said TORC, I don't know, they must not have saved we'll see what else is not saved here. And because we believe that it's a sale of property, and to sell property, you need the 4 local governments who own the property to approve that sale, which is per North Carolina state law. We lost that particular point from the Superior Court and are now in the appeals court. We had our hearing in September, and there's an unknown time frame, and we may hear back from that. There's no deadline requirement for the North Carolina Appeals Court. But that is separate from the mining permit or the fencing permits or the bridge permits. That has to do with the authority of the authority. So however that rules, it's incorrect to say that they've got approval to do all of the permits. That lawsuit is independent of all the different permits. And the Airport Authority in Wake Stone tries to relay it differently. So that's why I'm making a special point to say that here. Now, as I relayed to you in March, and again, and it was denied in July. And now we learned that again, they have reapplied for a buffer use permit for the fencing. Now I ask you, they're saying there's going to have no impacts by having these gravel roads go through the streams and the deforestation. I say not so fast. And also they applied for a permit for noose buffers over Crabtree Creek. In order for the Oddfellows new quarry pit to work, it's a separate pit. They have to get the rock and dirt out somehow. And they proposed to put a 66-foot wide bridge. That's a 4-lane major highway width. That's the width of I-40 over Crabtree Creek, just upstream of Umstead State Park. And DEQ, instead of denying it like they did the fence, they approved that, and the Umstead Coalition has filed an appeal, and that will be heard in the administrative court, which is, if you don't like the state agency's decisions, in January. There's no public input per se. That's the agencies are the DEQ and we are working that out, but we are optimistic. We don't think that was a complete application. And then, of course, in April of this year, Wake Stone actually submits a mining permit application to DEQ. I'm proud to say that the public submitted almost 2,000 public comments. There was a small handful in the order of 10 comments in support of the quarry, and they were the quarry owners, the quarry employees, basically, and there was, and their consultants that they paid. And their basic argument was, is they're a good neighbor now, they'd be a good neighbor to this. Of course, I think you can hear I disagree with that. And they also argued that the Nightdale quarry they've been a good neighbor to, although the example that gave is somebody who actually spoke against them in court, and they bought her out for an enormous amount of money, and she walked away. And then they devalued that property for tax purposes to nothing almost. But also that quarry has 1,500 feet of buffers, and we don't have anything like that here in the current quarry, and even less with the proposed quarry. Then there was 2 public hearings based on the outreach public comments, and then DEQ did not issue a permit yet, which is somewhat typical. They issued a 7-page additional information letter. That is the official term. They're asking Wake Stone Corporation for additional information. Then Wake Stone has 180 days to comply and supply. They could get an extension to that, or they could do it sooner. And they've asked for such things about who owns the land, do they have authority to mine there, are they subject to the State Environmental Protection Act? They ask that directly. They ask questions related to that. Because now remember, it's public land on one side, the Oddfellows tract, connected to private land on the other side. And for noise and study, and for some air quality information and those kinds of things. Now, DEQ can deny a mining permit by law only based on 7 criteria, which are basically an adverse impact to a park, recreation area, an adverse impact to a residence, and an adverse impact to water quality or habitat and wildlife. We believe it meets all of them, but of course we'll see how that comes out. Now let's just drill down a little bit. The big pit on the right is the existing pit. It's the existing pit. It's almost 400 feet deep, and the processing plant, they call it. This is where they conveyor belt, sort, clean, wash, all of that, and then their rock comes out. This is Star Lane. And earlier I indicated where the trees were dead. Well, this is the buffer that they're supposed to keep. And you see these 2 ponds right here? Those did not exist in the park. That's water that was diverted from the quarry into this park. There was no water drainage ways there. That they created these. And those are the dead trees. And then it goes and it flows into Umstead State Park into Crabtree Creek right here. And so this is the parking lot over here. And of course I said Crabtree Creek. Now remember, we're flowing from the bottom of the screen, Crabtree Creek, to the north. And this is Cary's water reclamation plant. Used to be called a sewage treatment plant, and they discharge. And there's about 1.1 mile from I-40 all along the current quarry and the proposed new quarry that would be affected. And we're talking about a 200-foot deep pits on either side of Crabtree Creek with very little buffer. And when you do that, you do something that's technically, it's actually called starving a stream. You take away all the tributary water that would flow into the creek, and you take it away from it's already been taken away from the existing site. Their own consultant study that they supplied with the mining permit indicated by our analysis that this is currently a losing stream, or at least not a gaining stream. You take away all this over here, you take away the water that comes in from the soil and the surrounding areas. Now, what happens there if you have a losing stream is that your low flow conditions are low. Cary's water reclamation plant just upstream depends upon something called a 7Q10, or the effluent standards, or the base related to the base flow of Crabtree Creek. So if you decrease the flow into Crabtree Creek over this reach, you could be jeopardizing the future permit expansions of the town of Cary for this water reclamation plant. So there's other public, and the town of Cary did submit a pretty strong letter with various concerns. Among that, also the blasts are currently heard from the existing quarry into this quarry, and there's a good potential that these blasts will cause some extra damage. Now, this existing quarry was in 1981 initiated, and the water reclamation plant for the town of Cary was not yet built. So all that surface blasting that went on was yet not necessarily felt by the, because, and a lot of times the surface blasting can be even more damaging. So now this red right here is where the 1992 massive landslide that filled 90% of Crabtree Creek occurred. Today, there's not even the 100-foot buffer that was committed. And in case I forget to mention it, I want to say that on the mining permit, remember they took away the undisturbed buffers and replaced it with excavated buffers? Well, what that does is it allows them to take this very sensitive, narrow lack of buffer and put a new perimeter road, retaining walls, etc., which is what they show on the plan. So when you hear them say we have buffers, one, they're very narrow, only 100 feet. Two, most of it's deforested anyways, and roads and this kind of thing, not what you and I would normally think of as a buffer. The yellow square right here on Crabtree Creek is the proposed location of the bridge. So what they want to do is at 66 feet wide as I-40, and bring their dirt and their rock and their they call it product around their perimeter roads, the processing plant, and sell it. And of course, here's that East Coast Greenway. Here's Lake Crabtree County Park on your lower left, and we connect into Umstead State Park. And then 286 is right here to your immediate left. Now, oh, that's just a reminder to tell you about the Cary Reclamation Plant. So let's talk about a summary of what some of the impacts are. We have the natural habitat destruction, and the Wildlands Network has pointed out that this is the remaining area in this whole region that connects Jordan Lake to the east for all sorts of wildlife habitat, bobcat, birds, etc. It's also the area of considered for protection mussel, the American pigtoe mussel. And we got water quality, air quality. You saw the dust. There is a lot of fine, sharp particles that can get into your system. You can't see or feel or smell, but they stay there, do enormous harm. And if you watch the movie or talk to Liz Adams, there's great potential here for, we're currently having air quality issues and additional ones. The downstream flooding, if you channelize all the stormwater instead of letting it soak into the soil, you get low flows that are too low, and you got high flows that are too high. Of course, the loss of green space, and we don't really end up with much. They say there might be a park, they'll give it to us park when they're done, but hopefully you'll get the drift, and I'll tell you a little bit more, that there basically is no land left that's usable after the quarry. And we can talk about it in Q&A, but you cannot access safely or utilize any kind of reservoir, sewage treatment, reclamation, etc. for the pits. They're just a liability, and they're not going to be used for anything. And of course, we lose the opportunity of a great recreational area. Let's talk about a couple things. This is on the Oddfellows track. This is the Foxcroft Lake. It is registered with Wake County as a natural heritage site. This is where the Scouts camped, and on the lake. It's just the upstream of where I'm in the park. I'm in Umstead State Park now, taking this picture, because the upstream of this is in Umstead State Park. Then it flows down here into Crabtree Creek, which then immediately flows into Umstead State Park. And as far as we can tell, this would be dewatered, destroyed. They technically stay 50 feet away from it with a 400-foot deep pit, though. And this is Old Reedy Creek Road Greenway. The road part is kind of is interesting, but we do have a couple residents here, very close to the proposed quarry. And now, when they first start this proposed quarry, if they get approval, they would have to come out this road for the logging trucks and for the construction trucks for the bridge, even if they do use the bridge for taking the dirt, the overburden, which is the dirt between the top of the soil and the rock. Now, just for the exploratory drilling that occurred earlier this year, using this road. The truck conflicts, just with a few of them, those big quarry trucks, enormous conflict. A child almost got run over. And they seem to think that we just ignore the 2 years it's going to take or however long to log it and prep it and all this kind of stuff. And we'll just live with that for that length of time and we'll be okay, don't worry. You know, but I think that's not right. I personally don't think logging trucks and quarry trucks are compatible with this use. This right over, all this green space here is and then leading over to the right of this picture is the forested trails between Lake Crabtree County Park and I-40. This is the I-40 bridge. And that's proposed to be an office park. Right now, this is Carrie's parking lot is down there. It's just utilized as it should be for its designated greenway. It's the East Coast Greenway. It's the US 1 bike route. It's extremely popular. We talked about the air quality and dust and the small particles. And Liz Adams measured a blast that we knew it was going to occur. And she measured enormous levels of toxic, very small particle dust. Truck conflicts, water quality, loss of buffers, critical habitat. We have one private home that is 200 feet from the top of the pit. And they're only offering basically 10 feet of effective buffers for the property. And then the fence, the berm, the teeny berm, it's only 15 feet high, a perimeter road around the pit, and then the pit. That's like no buffers. And we talked about those other things. So grave environmental damages. Now let's just hone in a little bit on the buffers along the creek. This is Crabtree Creek, the blue, with a little bit of buffers, and actually the inner black, the hatch line, is all they are proposing to keep. And if you've been in this area, you know that it's extremely steep. And remember that they originally had 100 feet of undisturbed buffers on the existing quarry side, which is to the right. And it was from the top of bank, which is standard. In the 2018 shady change of the permit, when they kind of slipped in a new map, they changed the buffers to the center line of Crabtree Creek. Well, nobody does that. That's not standard. It's not no permits. It's not the way it should be done. It's just not right. And in part, they're doing because they weren't even making the 100 feet down here where their bridge, where the stream collapsed. This is the stream collapse. This is where the bridge is proposed. And now they want to put extra perimeter walls, retaining walls, perimeter roads, retaining walls, etc. And so on the new side, they want to come back only 30 feet from the creek, 10 feet of, or 10 to 15 feet of deforestation, a fence, gravel perimeter road, and a pit. So basically, they're not having what we think of as undisturbed buffer. This unexcavated thing is a big problem. And the same thing occurs over here with, now this little perimeter was made before we actually saw the site, but you kind of get the idea. Here's the area where the pit top of the pit would be, and here is a private home. And remember that this permit should be denied based on devastation effects to private home. Back to Crabtree Creek. Okay, here's Crabtree Creek. We're going to look at this cross section right here. And so this in the middle is Crabtree Creek. And these red dots are basically the 100-year flow. Well, no, actually, the top of bank, which is so the top of bank, which is where the buffer should be measured from. They've committed 100 feet of undisturbed buffers in their existing permit, which is to the right. And this blank over here is the quarry. And this guy right up here is the existing perimeter row with a little berm that goes before they shoot down into the pit. And they're supposed to have 100 feet from top of bank to this pit that's undisturbed. Well, you can see that's not the case. They're violating their current permit, which is probably why they wanted to say unexcavated, because they have a berm, they have a road, they have whatever. They had to rebuild this bank. And then this is the existing area in here. And now all they're proposing to do is to come back 30 feet per the news buffers, with the exceptions of the bridge and the this and the that, and then perimeter road, et cetera, et cetera. And a little bit more, so that's the sky right here. So note the green. Okay, so here's what you're really seeing in more to scale. So this on the right is the existing quarry pit. And it is, they plan on doing another 170 feet of excavation in that pit. And then over here is the proposed Oddfellows pit. And most of this area in here will be disturbed by perimeter roads, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of this trees and forested is gone. And this is basically to scale. So what you have is, remember, this stream bank failed in 1992 from a blast. Now you've taken away any kind of soil backing. Of course, a lot of this is rock, granted, but up here it's not. Up here it's soil. So first of all, where's the water going to come in from the soil and into the, it's gone. And second of all, that's a pretty narrow pinnacle. And we're talking 400 feet deep here. Pretty impressive. Now, opportunity lost. We could retain what we have now, we believe, and make a whole destination center. And with connection of Lake Crabtree County Park. And we don't think we should lose the 150 acres of Lake Crabtree County Park. And agreed with us was the University of North Carolina, the Development Finance Initiative, DFI. And they did a study commissioned by Wake County Commissioners that showed that, in fact, our idea of having a recreational facility connected would net the year, would bring in over $200 million of net revenues to the airport. Or of development into the airport on their property. So again, this makes more financial sense and more community sense. I want to digress a second because you'll hear what I consider a myth, that if we got the quarry, that could get us bike trails on the 286 track. Well, first of all, there's only 158, they're only talking about a subset of the 286, 150 acres of it. Second, there is no guarantee in the mineral lease. If you read the mineral lease, there's no real definite commitment that they would actually allow that to happen. And remember that the fence like isolated 286 and kind of like said, here you go, that's not available for the public anyways. It only would be, if it even went forward, it'd only be for 10 years. And it would most likely result in the loss of the 147 acres of forested bike trails at Lake Crabtree County Park. So you get a net of 3 acres, and it takes almost 10 years to get a trail system established. So you basically got nothing. And then it'd be removed from the Carey's parking lot, et cetera. And we also believe, based on our Sierra Club folks that walked the 286 track with Wake Stone in 1980, that what's really might be going on here is that Wake Stone had using it as a holding area for expanding the Oddfellows track into 286, which is why it's probably only 10 years, and then we wouldn't have anything. So basically, we believe the best way to have bike trails and pedestrian trails is to preserve the Oddfellows track and to preserve Lake Crabtree County Park, and to work with the community and for that purpose. So where we are today, let me just got a couple more slides. I will summarize some of the things we're at. We've got various local governments and committees, most recently the Wake County Open Space and Parks Advisory Committee. I've urged the Wake County Commissioners to do everything in their power to oppose quarry permit from being issued. The town of Morrisville, Wiley-Nickel, the city of Raleigh, et cetera, have expressed severe concerns. The Regional Transportation Alliance, which was actually commissioned a task force for the airport about how to raise funding, et cetera, they actually came up on their own with a recommendation they should revamp this land use plan, improve community goodwill, and remove this distraction of the quarry. So they're with us, and that was the task force for the airport. As I said, the Additional information request had gone out from DEQ for the mining permit. Just this week, posted on the DEQ mining website is a cover letter, but not the study for a noise study. In talking with the DEQ mining personnel about the study, they would not give me the study yet until it was finalized. But it was only 1 week of monitoring in a handful of locations, not even near the park impacts, the areas of the park that would be impacted, and then a couple instantaneous monitoring. So I don't believe it's likely not going to be a sufficient noise monitoring study, but they are proceeding with that. And we believe DEQ mining should obey the law and deny the permit, but DEQ mining is very pro-mining. So it is an uphill battle. And as I said, RDU has reapplied for the fence permit, although it may or may not include all of the Oddfellows track. And we're appealing the news buffer authorization for the bridge. No bridge, you cannot have a new quarry. And then we're waiting on the appeal for the lawsuit, which has to do with the validity of the mineral lease. That is independent from the DEQ permitting processes that are going on. And then I'll leave with what you can do to help. The governor has, you know, he has some weight here. He can help prevent the first rock quarry in North Carolina that would be on managed by a private company on public lands. In this case, next to a state park. There's a sand pit somewhere, but this would be the first rock mine, and none of them are next to a state park like this. He could help reinstate the 50-year sunset clause. They can't, if the sunset clause that was promised for us for 39 years and recently reneged, if it's reinstated, they have nowhere to process that rock or market that rock out of. They cannot come out of Old Reedy Creek Road. That's a one-lane bridge. There's no access out. And they could mandate a full State Environmental Protection Act that we believe should be done. It's more than 10 acres being destroyed of public land. Should trigger that. You can help fund our legal fights. We've got bumper stickers, which we're going to put a new store up in a couple weeks. And Caroline is going to help do that, and then we'll just buy one too, and we can mail it to you. You can write your local elected officials. They own the property, and if you're an organization or a company and you want to join the cause, you can add your logo to the growing list of organizations, and we'll post it to the website. And again, the information, stoprduquarry.com. We also have a Facebook page, a discussion RDU Forest page on Facebook, and there's the GoFundMe link. In addition, there's a link to a lot of other information and Charlie Morris's 400 Feet Down 1-hour documentary, which is a must-see. You can no longer show it in a theater, obviously. We had sellout crowds to the Rialto and the Cary Theater. But Charlie has allowed us to see it for free. Thank you very much, Charlie Morris, for doing that great resource for us. Well, there you go. It's back to you, Wa, to see what I can do for answering questions.
Yeah, thanks so much for the info session, Jane. I think there's a lot for people to take in. So don't worry, we will definitely share the slides, the recordings to the Facebook page and Sierra Club Capital Group, and we should also distribute that to Umstead Coalition's group, so that you guys can also have the file too to share. So a number of places where you can access these information after the meeting. So yeah, without further ado, let's get to some questions. Our first question is from David Crowley. Where does the governor stand on RDU Quarry?
Well, per the governor's initiative, we met with him well over a year ago, before the permit was issued. He definitely knew about the sunset clause and was evaluating the sunset clause, but he hadn't made any commitments yet. You know, he was up for election. You can understand that. So he has not made any public statements on this at all. He's definitely, definitely is receptive to receiving the thousands of emails that he's received. And I think he's definitely knows the citizens are concerned and receptive to our concerns. So that's why we want to urge, but he's made no public statement.
So in other words, more reason that people should write to Governor Cooper is what you're saying.
Yes.
I see. The next question is from Mary Moose. I hope I said your last name correctly. Sorry if I mispronounced. The question is, will the responses to the additional information letter be public? I think this is referring to
yes.
Okay.
Yes, and DEQ Mining will post it on their site. If you Google DEQ Mining, it'll come up with their site. But it's actually under the Division of Energy, Mineral, and Land Resources under Division of, under the Department of Environmental Quality. Well, should I stop sharing my screen?
It's up to you. It's fine either way. I mean, just in case someone might want you to refer to a certain slide. I mean, okay. Also just leave it on so people can go to the websites if they like to afterwards.
Okay.
So, yeah. So next question we have is from Libby Slight. During the comments to DEQ during the most recent public hearings, there were many scientists, professors, and engineers who stated that the quarry is detrimental to the environment. Has this been helpful for your attorney in the suit against the quarry and DEQ?
Yes. Well, not because of the first lawsuit against the airport, because that has to do with the authority. But yes, in terms of the bridge permit appeal, and in terms of public perception, and in terms of reaching out to local governments and the governor. Now, we believe it should also be effective for the agency that's trying to evaluate whether or not to give them a permit. And if for some reason that they, in our opinion, disobey the law and issue a permit, then the process is we have the right to appeal. And during the appeal, all of that scientific information would be extraordinarily useful and grounds to win on appeal. So the answer is, and that's a whole other set of folks that are independent from the mining people, who is a staff of 2, one of which is retiring, who are deciding about whether to issue a mining permit. So all of that information was perhaps even more important than folks may have realized. Good question. Thank you, Libby.
Yeah. And then Libby has a follow-up question with that. Can't we get someone from NC State University to find new species or something in the Elk Meadows tract so they could not be destroyed? That's we've talked about looking for species that's vital to the park, didn't we, Jing?
That's right. Now, part of the additional information letter, they've been asked to find the American pigtoe mussel, but my skepticism there is that Wake Stone is supposed to get somebody to look for the mussel. Same as Wake Stone is commissioning the noise study. So it's a little biased. They probably will go out with 5 minutes and say, we see nothing here. And so, but NC State is a little bit hard to get them to do just because you want them to do something. So Libby, if you've got some contacts there, that's a great idea.
You mean if we have contacts to various students or faculty in NC State, we should reach out to them?
If they have the ability to do this, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay, so we have 2 questions from Mark Stolman. One of them is, will Umstead Coalition, well, what the public actually, honestly, get a chance to debate the answers Wake Stone give for the additional information? That's my question.
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's frustrating for us because there does not appear to be any official process for that to be evaluated. Now, technically and officially, any comments that are submitted by the public or agencies or anybody to DEQ Mining about the permit are supposed to be, and up until they either issue a permit or deny the permit, all of those public comments are supposed to be utilized in evaluating whether a permit is issued. So therefore, we get some additional information back and we respond in writing as public comments. DEQ mining is supposed to, by law, use them to evaluate. Now, the reason there's a little skepticism in my voice is because we believe, just like Libby said, that we presented an enormous amount of scientific, the public did and the scientists did, of information about why this should be denied at the public hearing. And yet, DEQ thinks that they asked everything there was to ask in the additional information letter, and we believe it's like 10% of what they're missing. So again, so technically yes, but practically it may end up being extremely useful with our lawyers on appeal.
I see. So in just kind of follow, I kind of have a question to follow up with that. So is there actually, do you believe there actually some way that we can actually make sure that they allow for time for review by the public and also comment?
So DEQ has only 30 days to respond once all of the additional information is received. And as they receive it, they said they would post it. So when but then they have an option to either approve or deny the permit within 30 days or ask for an additional information. And then give the quarry another 180 days up to reply. Again, I think that the governor ensuring that the agencies follow the law and fully evaluate the comments and fully evaluate the additional information. So for example, if this noise study is, I suspect it'll be very weak. And that would be something that we should be able to counter, and they should be able to evaluate it. Whether they will or not, I don't know. It's a staff of one, remember.
Yeah, I do hope that the public have a chance to review and comment. So fingers crossed. So next question from Mark Stoneman. Any legal action against the sunset clause in the works? Do you want to answer that?
So we're certainly considering that, Mark. You can join it. I guess I don't want to fully answer that question.
That's fair.
I might add, though not on that in particular, but there are some other knowledgeable people on the panelist who are hanging in there. So there might be some ones that might raise their hand or something to also answer some questions. Okay, Mark, ask me a different one that's easier.
Well, in any case, next question is from Helen Todd. Has anyone found out how many of the current quarry employees have health problems from the dust from the blasting?
An excellent question. There's some safety reports I know that some volunteers have seen. Whether they're tied back in, I don't know, but maybe somebody does know how to figure that out. They did have a fatality, but that's not, I mean, it's very sad, but construction sites are dangerous places.
Yeah.
But I would suspect they may, because that dust is quite prevalent in there. It travels quite a bit. I mean, Liz Adams on the blast we knew about, and you see it in Charlie Morris's 400 Feet Down documentary. She measured enormous levels, something on the order of toxic as 2, and she ordered 200 milligrams per liter. And she was over at Old Reedy Creek Road, quite far removed from the quarry blasted existing quarry. So that dust can travel.
Yep. I mean, they carry by air, it goes far. So yeah, I'm gonna try to catch up because we got some more questions trickling in. So here's an anonymous attendee. When listening on the DEQ meeting, Wake Stone claimed that they were good neighbors with few complaints. With the particulate in the air generated by blasting, should there be a constant flow of complaints filed every time they blast? This would demonstrate that they are continually violating the max level air particulates.
Yes, I think that one thing that there was a lot of complaints in the 80s and the 90s, and then occasionally in the 200, the 20s, and then more now, of course. And I think that we should file complaints, no matter what, for the blasting, when we see, if we actually can see any kind of dust. By the way, there's a lot of dust that's actually in the park vegetation. So if we ever got any extended periods of non-rain, and you can take pictures of the dust, you know, it's enough that it used to cover the picnic areas, and now it'll at least cover roots and those kind of things. We should file those complaints in writing. It turns out that several of our complaints we did verbally, and they never made it to the files. Many of us are victims of that. So I would definitely file a complaint for everything.
So you recommend people to file written complaints. So who do they direct the complaint to?
So it would be to Brian Wren, who is the director of the division that mining is under. Division of, I would go all the way up there. I wouldn't go to the regional office of DEQ, because that's just water quality. And folks are good there and they're conscientious, but we're not getting any written follow-up. They're saying, oh, well. So for example, I complained about an illegal stormwater discharge, and the response I got, with black pipe and everything, into Umstead State Park. And the response I got verbally, that they've yet to give me written over many months, is, well, DEQ mining approved that discharge into our park. Well, in my read, that's illegal because the state law says you're not supposed to have an adverse impact to the state park. And that discharge was not into Crabtree Creek, where they are allowed to discharge into Crabtree Creek. They have a permit to discharge there, but not into interim parts of the creek. In those ponds I showed you, another source of those water was this, what I believe is an illegal discharge. But DEQ mining approved that discharge into those and created those new ponds. That I don't believe is in their water quality permit. So I think we need to go a little higher than the regional office, a little higher than DEQ mining, and go right to the director, Brian Wren. He's the director of energy, mineral, and land resources. And while remind me, we can put that link out. We can put that email out too. I think that's, yeah. Whoever asked, whoever anonymous is, thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I also just shared Brian Wren's contact info in the chat, but I'll add that to the Google Doc that I'll share with all the other links for upcoming events. I would please see the governor. All right. Let me just say that one of the governor's folks, staff, did share with me that they appreciated the public comments and to keep them coming. That's almost a direct quote. If that's true, that sounds encouraging.
Well, they're of value.
Okay, we got more questions in. Okay, so here's one for Henry Copeland. This park is a unique resource for 2 million Triangle residents and tens of millions of future residents. What thoughts on strategies for making this a PR issue for RDU?
It seems a no-brainer. I mean, their own task force said it was bad will for community, and there was nobody who in the public comments that said, oh, hey, build a quarry and destroy that and destroy Lake Crabtree County Park, go for it. So I think certainly you can email them, but I think that your elected officials could talk to them. Senator Wiley-Nickel has, of course. Your local governments who own the quarry, the city of Raleigh, the city of Durham, counties of Durham, and I think if you contact them and they get more and more pressure about how they get it, but this is really bad PR, an opportunity lost and bad PR. I think that could be helpful. Yeah, does anybody else, is Dave Anderson on here or anybody else that wants to help answer the question?
So, well.
Okay, well, if that person has some other ideas too, maybe they could add it to the chat or question Q&A.
Yeah, I mean, if people who are experts, I know there are people who are experts in among attendees. If you have some additional thoughts, definitely type in the chat, because I see that Charlie's been sharing videos and Matt Townsend's also been sharing videos, which is super helpful to keep the people engaged. Anyways, so we have another question from Libby Slight. Did you ever get a transcript of DEQ public comment section?
I was just typing the answer in. I'll just finish typing it, but I'll tell her it anyways. So no, we did not. And in fact, we were very disappointed that the public information officer did not summarize them at all, because we thought that would be his job, and they typically might do that. All we got was, but we did. We got you can go to their website and you can you can listen to the audio, but there is not a transcript of it. Nor is there a summary of it. Very disappointing. But they also do have available a subset of the written public comments that you can download. I say a subset because even though they told us in a meeting all the way up to the division level that all of the comments that came in from the day they submitted the permit through the July 7, the second public hearing, would be part of the public hearing public comments, they only included online the comments that came in from the first public hearing, June 23, through 10 days after the second comment, to a second public hearing, so through July 17. So there's a whole slew of initial comments that they didn't put online. And then the new comments that they're supposed to also evaluate, they haven't put those online either, despite our written, they told us they would, and then they took it back, and then we asked them twice to do it, and they haven't done that part yet.
That's disappointing.
Yep.
But at least you say there's audio on your website.
There is.
Okay.
But to Libby's point, that's not as useful as actually having the text, right? Because you've got all that amazing information. Now, a lot of the amazing information was submitted in writing as well, a lot of the scientific stuff.
Speaking of scientific, Liz Adams asked, do we need to hire a noise expert to do an independent study?
That is a great idea. We do have a noise expert at our call. His name is Stewart Acoustical, Norrell Stewart, and we paid him to be our expert witness, and he did a great job at the public hearing. Now, interestingly enough, he was the expert that also helped DEQ back in 1980 on the existing quarry, and his evaluation of the current quarry is that they did not comply with their promised noise abatement procedures that they had promised. The location of the crushers, their location of this and that, and all their stuff. They didn't do it. And he was very appalled at the decrease of the existing buffers and the decrease of deforestation and the minimal new buffers and this bridge that would just echo the noise into the park. Now, we could employ him to do a noise study, I think, but it would cost some dollars. We could also employ him to evaluate Wake Stone's noise study and its results.
Good to know there's still some options.
Yep.
We got a comment from Bob Gary. Could the airport authority reverse the land lease, or is it a binding contract?
So it's a very unusual contract. It was not like any of the airport contracts. Normally, if they're doing a normal lease, they would protect the airport authority. And in this particular lease, it protects Wake Stone. So currently, the airport authority is supposed to allow Wake Stone to go through some additional process to try to get a permit. Now, they can't do that forever, but it's a very bad document for a public agency to give up a lot of their rights. And And but it doesn't say that the airport has to fight for the quarry. And the airport has been proactive. The airport has been pushing for the fence. They've been pushing for the quarry. You know, they've been putting glowing letters in to the official files. So they certainly are under no obligation for their contract to be pushing so hard for the quarry. And there's a lot of things they could do to, you know, they don't have to spend so much of their attorney dollars to fight us or the quarry either. There are a lot of options that they could do. And there is, you know, eventually, there will be a time frame where the airport authority no longer has to agree, agree.
All right, got a question from Charlie. How hopeful are you that the quarry will ultimately be stopped?
Well, I want to answer that by the power of the people is enormous. So, for example, the airport actually proposed in the 1960s to take 1,000 acres of Umstead State Park and consume it with a runway that would have been kind of parallel to the runways we know now. Well, as you can imagine, the public was enormously upset. That's how Umstead Coalition got founded by the now late Margaret Nygaard, who was also stopped the damming of the Eno River and founded Eno River State Park. And then we stopped then there was a perpendicular runway that was going to fly over the Oddfellows track and into Umstead State Park and affect RTP, and we stopped that. It took many years. Finally, by 1980, almost 20 years later, the airport finally listened to the public. And when you listen to the public, you actually get something better for the airport and the public. And we got the runway out to the west that we have now. We stopped a highway, 4-lane highway going through Umstead State Park. It took 15 years. But the power of the people, we stopped a dry dam consuming a lot of the park at Ebenezer Church Road and Turkey Creek. So that's why I was so excited about the person who wanted to file the complaints all the time too. And yeah, I mean, it's a hard, long fight, but I'm optimistic that we can win this because it's the wrong thing to do. It's our public property, we own it, and the power of the people.
But ultimately, we still need the power of the people to make it happen. But the attendance, I think, speaks for itself.
Oh, extremely interesting. Yes, yeah.
So we got a question from Lisa Lisk. So has anyone found the pigtail mussel and discovery at a Crabtree Creek could be helpful?
Yes, if they find it at Crabtree Creek, then that should stop this quarry. Actually, the quarry should be stopped because they're 200 feet from a private home. It should be stopped because of the detrimental impacts for the park, all this kind of thing. Yes, if they found the pigtail mussel in there, it's been identified as something that should stop the quarry.
So maybe we should just have people do like a public treasure hunt for the pigtail mussel.
Yeah. I think somebody knowledgeable needs to do that, but yes.
Yeah. Okay. And a question from Charles Uzo. I hope that is pronouncing your last name right. If not, I'm so sorry. But his question is, I'm against the quarry, but who are the customers and what sort of rocks are being extracted?
All these great questions. So the rock is it's quartz, and it's a very high quality rock actually, and the market is for roads, houses, pavement, concrete. Rock is required for any kind of development or build up for the community, and we're not denying that. But the question that we have, and it also is true that you need to be ideally 7 to 15 miles from where you want the rock to be utilized. And so pavement, construction projects, etc. However, the real question we believe is this new quarry needed? And the answer we don't believe that's so, because we have 2 other quarries serving the same market in the same vicinity from 2 competing companies. We have the Hanson Quarry on Durley Road, which has a 50-year sunset clause on it to expand north on its existing pit. So it's not jumping the creek. We've stopped it from jumping the creek. It's on the same side of the creek, of Crabtree Creek. and they have 50 years of life. Then there's the Westgate, on Westgate Road, the Martin Marietta Quarry, that's closer to the airport entrance, could help the airport with its new runway, et cetera, and is offered overburden, all this fill that the airport wants. They said, here, we got extra, you can have it. And they won't tell you how many years of life they have, but in talking to people who seem to know this kind of stuff, they have at least 100 years of life there. So, and then there are other quarries. The current quarry argued that they needed to come in because their rock would be needed for the new runway into the park. But by the way, their bid was way too high, and the rock came from way far away for that runway. The runway we know is the American runway, the international runway. But the point is yes, you need rock, but no, we don't believe you need this rock because we already can supply the needed market for this growing economy for the existing quarries that we have. So Wake Stone says, well, we need this quarry versus their other quarries, but I believe that's not our issue for a private company. You know, the rock is there, but it's aggregate, it's gravel, it's rock. So if you're gonna, you know, it's graded, it's sorted. If you're gonna put a gravel down for a road or make it into pavement.
So basically the gist of it is that, yes, we do need rocks for the public, but the public doesn't need this particular quarry to sustain itself because there are so many other quarries already kind of actually surrounding the state park, in the vicinity of the state park itself already.
That's correct.
Yeah. I mean, AC Woody would also comment that it's very interesting that Martin Marietta has never been involved. Yeah. But next up is from Matt Riddle. And also sorry for the delay. I mean, I would like to address all the questions possible. So if it's all right with people, I can extend the meeting to another 10 more minutes to see if we can address them all. So here's a question from Matt Riddle. If we win on saving Odd Fellows, does it increase the chance to allow Umstead to acquire 286 and also increase chance of saving Crabtree 147 acres from becoming another horrible office park?
I think so. Here's why. First of all, William B. Umstead, the state parks have offered to buy both the Oddfellows track and 286, and they have it in writing to offer 286, or at least help manage it with the airport. And I think our chances are increased if we save the Oddfellows track, because then we haven't set up a precedent of trying to Wake County to pay some enormous unsustainable amount of money for our recreation. And the FAA does allow that the airport can lease their land for $1 a year or less than real market value for recreation. It's an exception. So that's allowed. So if we save one part, we're more likely to save the rest, and State Parks is extremely interested in putting in writing for both. Now, if we lose the Oddfellows, I think the opposite is true. I think we at best have a teeny amount of time at a subset of 286, and we lose everything else. So I think for the bike trails, as well as the trail connectivity, I think the best way forward for that goal, if that's your goal, is to preserve the Oddfellows track.
Oh, here's a follow-up from the anonymous attendee who was asking about filing complaint every time there's an issue. How do I measure particulate? Here's a citizen science question. Yep.
Yeah, so Liz Adams, if she can answer, she might be better than I, but I know she's here. But you can get a purple air monitor that's a kind of an EPA protocol for measuring it. It's about $250, and you just Google purple air and you can get one. And they may or may not still have a free program. Several of us got a free one from RTI Air Program. And Liz may know if they're still available, but they were having a citizen air quality monitoring program you could put on your house or anything like that.
Yeah, that's good to know. Well,
and then if you want it public, you can share it online, and if you want it private, you can keep it private. And they have ones you can buy that you can get. You You have to get a wireless, or you can just have it standalone and you just keep unplugging a little secure digital disc in it. They're cute little things. They're only about this big. I don't know if you see me or not. And they're purple.
Yeah, Liz had just shared the link to the Purple Air, and I saw it. I think you can hang it in front of your bike and just bike around and go from there.
I think Liz wears it 24/7.
Yeah, speaking of Liz, it's a comment. Well, it's not a question, but a comment. We need new RDUAA board members since John King's term is ending. I agree. Yeah. It's a thought about.
John King has served on the board for since January of 2013. He has served already 2 extra 2-year terms, and he would like to be reappointed. Perhaps he has served the community quite well, and a new perspectives would be appropriate.
Yeah. Here's a question for Alex Preston. Does the decision from each of the county and city owners involved need to be unanimous or just a majority? Where do they stand on the issue?
Just a majority, does not have to be unanimous. And they have, they're mixed. None of them have come out in favor of the quarry. And none of them have joined our lawsuit to fight the quarry or the mineral lease. So it's a little bit of mix, but they certainly are influential and certainly can talk to their board members, their appointed board members. So I would urge you to reach out to all local elected officials.
And here's a question from Henry Copeland. Any potential to go for the jugular and shut down the current quarry for environmental violation, like air quality issue, using the EPA now that the wind from DC is shifting? Do you think it's possible to actually take it up to the EPA in DC?
Well, a lot of the federal regulations have to do with public lands. They had negative impacts into Crabtree Creek and our park, but our park is state. So we have not been able to find a hook to the current NEPA rules, the National Environmental Protection Act, or other things like that. But if that person wants to get back with us with some ideas, we go for it.
Yeah.
So far, the focus has been on the state regs because of that. Now, unfortunately, the U.S. regs for environmental protection have just been gutted for water quality. The Clean Water Act has been gutted, enforcement has been gutted, evaluation has been gutted, but most of that was done by what are those things? The executive orders by the president? I'm spacing out what these things are called. And therefore, a new president could unexecutive order them, right? And we're optimistic. The word on the street is that President Biden will revert to the way the Clean Water Act was being managed even 6 months ago. And but we don't know when. There's a lot of things he'd like to do just like that. He hasn't mentioned climate change. He hasn't mentioned environment. We just haven't heard any specifics. In fact, I asked somebody today about that and they didn't know the timing or specifics. But the Southern Environmental Law Center, the National Sierra Club, Environmental Defense Fund, etc., and we join with the Southern Environmental Law Center on that effort to try to prevent the gutting of the Clean Water Act, are fighting as hard as they can to get it back again.
Well, we got a lot of work ahead of us on that front. So,
yeah.
And I've got a last question from Libby Slide. It's probably a nice question to kind of close out with, because this is kind of going forward. How can we get more public awareness, TV coverage, other ideas, social media? What can we do to actually get the word out to more people?
I agree wholeheartedly. Of course, we have Charlie's 400 foot down in the rally got a lot of press coverage, and we got a lot of social media, but we need more of it to outreach beyond those who are currently in the know. And so we did hire twice, two different PR firms, and neither one quite achieved that goal for us. So I think they were a little bit not quite on target, a little bit more stodgy, didn't quite have the outreach. So either we need greater expertise or we need a different approach to reach a new audience. We've got some ideas. We've got a couple other new campaigns we're toying with. But if anybody wants to help us with that, we certainly would welcome that. We can share the ideas we're thinking about now. And I agree, Libby, we definitely need more of that.
And so for people who have ideas and want to pitch to Umstead Coalition, how would they contact you?
Our email is on our website, but it's info@umsteadcoalition.org. Right.
I should include that in the doc that I'll be sharing later on. But yes, info@umsteadcoalition.org. I put it on the chat. So if you have any idea, anything that you want to suggest, go ahead and use that email. And it's now 8:37, and I just want to take this chance to thank Dr. James Spooner from Umstead Coalition again for filling us in on this major issue. I mean, this is an issue that's touched a lot of people, and I hope that going forward you'll have more people who will support this cause and really fight back against this quarry that has proven to be to do very little for environmental protection. In fact, it would be a major environmental detriment. So my fingers are crossed that we can do everything we can to protect the park, the natural surroundings, and everything going forward. Yeah, again, thanks so much for coming, and thanks so much for everyone in the audience. We will have the recording ready. Once it's ready, it'll be posted, but we'll have the slides and the document with all the relevant information posted on our Facebook page to share first before. So keep an eye out for those, and hopefully we'll see you again in future meetings. All right.
I appreciate everybody and loving the park. Parks are overloved during COVID, as they always are and should be.
Yeah. All right. Have a good night, folks.
Thanks, Juan, for hosting this.
Thank you for coming.